So there's been this underlying assumption in the public discourse that education poses a threat to faith. And this belief is expressed by both people of faith and by people who are agnostic and atheist. Some Christian denominations do not like for their pastors to go to seminary because they are afraid that if they do, they will become too reliant upon the intellect, and that will dull their capacity to hear the Spirit. I know that sounds like blasphemy to a Presbyterian, which tends to be the denomination of engineers and teachers, but nevertheless, it is true. On the other hand, there are others who are of an agnostic temperament or atheists who assume that the more that a person knows about science or biology or astronomy or geology or history, the less likely they are to believe that the universe was created by and is governed by an omnipotent deity. In 2014, the Pew Research Center decided to conduct a very large survey to try to get an understanding of this relationship between education and faith. And the data that they collected revealed this complicated picture. Turns out, college-educated Christians are as observant, if not slightly more so, than Christians with less education. They attend church at the same rate, they pray daily, they say that religion is very important to them, and they believe in God with absolute certainty. Overall, people of faith are not in danger of losing their religion if they go to college. That is good news. But among those who do not identify with a particular faith tradition, those who would check the none box on that survey question, what faith are you a part of? The higher the education level in this group makes one less likely to believe in God. There are a lot of people who do not go to church, but who believe in God. And for this group of people, education seems to erode the capacity to hold such a belief. So let me take a moment to share with you why I think this is important. Now, I worked in higher education for about 20 years, and my experience confirms what I'm about to tell you. People who don't participate in a faith community tend to believe that faith, particularly Christianity, is akin to believing in a deity who can do magic or miracles. And they believe that it is this ability to do, of this God, whatever God it is that you worship, to perform magic that justifies the believer's faith in them. So it makes sense that among this group, the more education a person has, the harder it is to believe in a God, because magic isn't real. But people who have a long-term relationship with a faith community seem to know that faith is not at all about believing in magic. Faith is a conscious and a communal commitment to God, not because of what God can do, their magical powers, but because of the character of God. To put it another way, everyone centers their life around a God. It could be money, or prestige, or science, or politics, or physical health, or sex. There are many gods in this world. Christians center their life around a God who is revealed in the character of Jesus Christ. Now, this is confusing because there are a lot of miracles in the Bible, and they get a lot of press. No one can blame somebody who's looking in from the outside for thinking that we worship Jesus because he healed the woman with the hemorrhage and because he brought the little girl back to life. Those are pretty dramatic acts. It's almost as if these miraculous acts of Jesus have cast a spell over the reader in the same way that they do over the crowds that are starting to follow him in droves. The reader is either enthralled by the power of these acts, or they become focused on proving or disproving their reality. And either way, I would say it's a distraction. If it's possible, our efforts should be instead to break the spell of the miracle stories so that we can see beyond them to what is really going on. I think the New Testament has Jesus say over and over again that the miracle is not the point. Faith is. So let's look a little deeper at the passage that I just read. One of the problems that Jesus confronts in the religion of his day is its over-concern with purity. Purity plays an important role in any religion. We participate in a purity ritual every Sunday. We just did it when we say our confession. By saying these words together, by admitting the ways in which we have fallen short throughout the week, we are preparing ourselves to hear and receive something new. It is as if we are vessels that are full of old, stale water, and we need somehow to pour this water out so that we can receive fresh, new water. That is the purpose of a purity ritual. But if a community becomes overly concerned with purity, with the act of cleansing one of sin, or getting rid of this old, stale water, it becomes an end in and of itself. And when this happens, all sorts of problems begin to arise. Religions that are overly concerned with purity become more concerned with who and what it should exclude rather than pouring out its blessings upon all God's children. It encourages duplicity in leaders because perfection is valued over compassion. And of course, no one is perfect, so those who want to be seen as having authority get really good at hiding their flaws. Punishment becomes an important element in the religion. It is employed as a way of keeping sin outside of the community of faith. And as a result, the religion becomes more violent. Harsh judgments become more common than forgiveness, as people are on the lookout for those who are unworthy of God. And finally, an over-concern with purity leads to the generation of endless laws and rules, which raise the bar of what is acceptable to God higher and higher and higher. And this was the state of religion that Jesus was working with. So countering this over-concern with purity becomes one of the defining traits of Jesus' ministry. Now, throughout the history of Christianity, many of us have thought that this over-concern with purity is Israel's problem, but it is every religion's problem, including our own. Every faith community is vulnerable to becoming overly concerned with purity. So how do you know if your religion is over-concerned with purity? You can tell just by listening. Is there a lot of condemnation, accusations of unrighteousness or unworthiness going around? Are the leaders really good at putting on a false front, concealing their shortcomings? That would suggest that the interest in being right has become greater than the desire for sincerity. Are the images and words that are used in rituals weighed down with violence? That would suggest that there is scapegoating going on. Are the rules designed to keep people out rather than invite people in? If so, chances are purity is becoming the primary concern. So, if we set aside the distraction of the miracles, and we know that over-concern with purity is the problem of the religion of the day, now these stories about Jesus healing the woman with the hemorrhage and bringing the little girl back to life reveal something entirely different. These are stories that reject the projection of purity in favor of healing and restoration. These are stories about Jesus brushing off concerns about unclean things in order to restore people who have been rejected. Now, there are many, many things in Israel that are considered unclean, but dead bodies and blood are the highest on the list. A rabbi would not have touched nor allow themselves to be close to either one of these. And that contrast is what makes these stories meaningful, not the drama of the miracles. Now, I'm going to focus for a moment on the woman with the hemorrhage, because I think her story, it's her story that really brings this point home. Rather than try to describe it, though, I'm going to tell you a story that might help us put ourselves in her place. So, in seminary, we acted out scenes from the Bible often. That was a way of getting into the scriptures from the inside. And so in one class that I was in, the professor wrote down the names of characters from different scenes in the Bible and tore them up, tore the pieces of paper up, and then put them in a hat. And each student was supposed to reach in and grab one of the characters out and then act out that character's scene without words. So they had to mime the scene from the Bible. Not my strong suit. So the hat came around to me, and I reached my hand in, and I pulled out the slip of paper, and I was just like, okay, who did I get? And I opened it up, and it was the woman with the hemorrhage. Lord, I thought, can I please have a second go at this? But it wasn't allowed, so I had to go with it. Now, you may have figured out by now that the woman with the hemorrhage is a story about menstruation. She was menstruating for 12 years. This is a real thing. It happens to people. Now, 12 years is extreme, but the number 12 is symbolic here. Now, in first century Israel, when a woman was menstruating, she was considered unclean, and she would have to live separately from the family, and she wouldn't have been allowed to go into the marketplace. You may have heard of the red tent. Well, that's the tent that the woman had to go into and live in for 5 days or so while she was on her period. And then she would go through a purity ritual and cleansing, and then she could be restored. So this woman who has been menstruating for 12 years would have been considered unclean. And she would have been living in isolation away from her family and outside of the community for 12 years. Now, beyond her physical pain, she must have suffered psychologically and spiritually. She spent all of her money trying to fix the problem, but no one could help her. This was not the character I wanted to act out in class. In this class, there were 25 of us, 3 women and 22 men. Some of whom were my friends, and many of whom thought that women shouldn't be in seminary, much less leading churches. I was not in the mood for it. But finally, it came my turn. I got up from my desk, and I thought, I don't know what to do. So I just walked into the corner of the classroom, and I crouched down. And as I looked out on this room full of mostly men, knowing that they knew what I was suffering from, I felt weighed down with this shame and embarrassment. I was unclean, and I was unworthy to be there. I felt like a discarded piece of rubbish in their eyes. One of the other women in the class was so moved with compassion that she got up from her chair and she came and she spontaneously wrapped her jacket around me. Finally, through the crowd, I saw Jesus coming towards me. I got in character. And being convinced that he could heal me, I knew that this was my one chance. But this was dangerous. I would have to violate the law of God in order to reach out and touch him. And if I were caught, I could be banished forever, or killed, or worse. But something inside this woman believed that she was worth saving, that her life meant something. And this belief gave her the courage, and so she did it. She reached out and she touched him. And when Jesus turned around, knowing what she had done, that she had violated the law, he called her daughter. He said, "Your faith has saved you." Now, was it faith in him? Maybe. Or was it faith in God's love for her? Was it faith in her worthiness of that love? I think it was the latter. And there are people just like this woman everywhere in the church. People who have been rejected by the church for their sexual orientation, for their gender, for their ethnicity, for the causes that they represented, for the heretical beliefs that they dared to hold or entertain. There are people who have been victims of the church's over-concern with purity, who were told in direct and indirect ways that they were unworthy to be in God's presence or to receive God's love. But despite the weight of all that pressure, they retained the faith that they were a child of God, worthy of love and healing. And this faith gives them the courage to stay put, to speak up, to reach out. Maybe you are that person. Or maybe you love someone who is that person. If you or someone you love are here despite being told at some point in your life that you don't belong in church, I hope that you can identify with this woman and her courage. And I hope that we can all hear that the most important part of this story is not that Jesus performed a miracle, but that he too recognized this woman as a child of God, worthy of God's love. That is the character of God that we worship. That is the power of salvation. That is the hope of our faith. Amen.